Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And
Today we're going to be talking about, the whole MAHA movement that's been going on with RFK Jr., but also a lot of other ex-Democrats, and how important it is to actually be talking about health, and why are the current Democrats so scared of talking about it?
and Andrew Cuomo, is he going to be running for New York State governor again, or is he maybe going to be a Republican or a Democrat? Well, let's find out.
And then there's a story about the dock workers. Apparently there's been some new updates with that.
Yeah, they're about to go on strike, so we're going to see if Biden wants to stop him, or is he angry at Kamala Harris and he's going to get revenge on her. And finally...
And also the Mexican president and all his intelligence, both the current and the future presidents of Mexico, just flubbed a bunch of long-time relationships with Spain by declining to invite them to the inauguration of the new president in October.
And maybe before we get started, I'll just tell the times of our shows. So I got a morning show that comes on every day at 10 a.m. Western time. That's 1 p.m. Eastern in the States. And this is our evening show right now. It comes on Monday through Friday from 4 p.m. Western and 7 p.m. Eastern time. So let's get it started.
In case you cared. So moving on to RFK Jr. first. So the first thing I want to show is that a while ago, The Atlantic, a few days ago, decided to publish a story regarding the woo-woo caucus of RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and the fact that apparently some people still do care about the health of America, not just America, but the whole world. But in this case, it's just America. Jillian Michaels was there, who is also, very into the movement.
Speech.
She also recently gave a speech, which we want to show. But the whole article essentially kind of blasts all of them and the Make America Healthy Again movement, because they're going on pseudoscience and it's all crunchy granola people that
There's no
just sound
pseudoscience
insane.
about this. This used to be the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm, exactly. That's what I was saying.
The Democratic Party is now pro-war, pro-big pharma, pro-industrial agriculture, and pro-censorship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are they? They are the Republican Party of the 90s. They are the George Bushes. They are the Dick Cheneys. Yeah. The funny thing is Dick Cheney's actually endorsing them now.
Yeah.
RFK was the conduit for Trump to the moderate and the independent voters on these populist causes like health and food freedom.
Yeah. And I mean, even within the article, it's essentially this writer, let me get her name, Elaine Godfrey, making fun of the whole movement and saying woo-woo meets MAGA, you could call it, or perhaps the crunchification of conservatism, which is funny because conservatism has always been about conserving, and that I think also encompasses the land and the food and how you produce it and where you get it from and how you treat animals, plants, the environment, etc. So it's crazy that now they want to throw this against the conservative or MAGA movement, which I think sometimes the MAGA movement isn't fully rhino conservative. And it's interesting because the owner of The Atlantic is actually Steve Jobs' ex-wife or wife, and she is very connected and very in the same environments as, for example, Bill Gates, and has a lot of NGOs, one really big one that focuses on vaccinations and health, but it's a very specific health and has been very linked also to big pharma, and that's what
all
we've
these
been
NGOs
discovering.
These rich people own are just ways to make money, and they try to tout health and freedom when it's anything but. It's actually about control and profit.
And surprisingly, in the article, they managed to also just go into all of the conservative movement people that kind of have had a hand or talk about health and how important it is. Like, for example, Jordan Peterson and his daughter and the whole lion diet and how dangerous it is to do that, even though neither of them have died and have been doing it for at least, I think, about 10 years now. So they want to disqualify people, same as they did during the pandemic, only because they don't agree with their views or they disagree with the general outline. But I think on health, most people can kind of come together and
Well, I don't know, because the way I'm seeing it is back in the 70s and early 80s, there were hippies in the leftist movement. And this was health and naturopathy and all this stuff was really part of being a liberal. And this was a huge demographic. But now I see these, like the people that are concerned about health are traditionalists, people that want to live on farms, people that want to live a traditional lifestyle, even preppers.
Have chickens.
Things like this. People that, this is now a conservative movement, but they have the same exact values that these natural hippies had back in the 70s and 80s, only a little bit more grounded, I would say.
Yeah, the crunchy hippies. And before, like the people that used to not vaccinate their kids or not really trust the medical industry was the Democrats and the hippies and that whole movement. And now they've kind of completely gone back on all of that and are all pro and like going after the most unhealthy things, I would say, and trying to defend them. In the same article, they try to defend food dyes and saying that it makes food fun for children. Well, no, there's been proven studies, and a lot of other countries, including the entire European Union and I think even Mexico, do not allow certain food dyes that are allowed in the States because of the health effects, not only on children, but on everybody that they could have. Some of it is hyperactivity.
Well, I will say this article was trying to go against the RFK MAHA movement, make America healthy again. But a lot of people that were running the CDC and were against RFK have now come to unify with him, and they realize Trump's going to win the election, and RFK is going to be a huge part of appointing the people that are going to run the CDC and run these other departments. What I would say to RFK is be very aware of these people that used to be your enemies and that used to talk crap about you, who are now trying to be friendly with you. They want appointments. They want to get inside this Trump administration. You need to clean this up. You need to get rid of all these people and appoint new people. You can fire them. You can fire them now and then hire them back later if you think they're actually credible. But let's go into this RFK interview I think we had. I think he's talking about somebody that used to be his enemy or his he was opposed to.
Sure.
I'll tell you something that interesting that happened today, and
It's a little low.
was going to mention this to Rand. So it was an extraordinary event to me, but Robert Redfield, who I really go after in my Fauci book, kind of a hammer and tongs, wrote an editorial in Newsweek magazine today saying that he was endorsing President Trump because President Trump was going to restore American health, and that President Trump, he said, a lot of people might surprise me to see this, but hear me say this, but he has chosen exactly the only person who can do this, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This was breathtaking to me because this is the guy who's the head of the CDC that I've been criticizing for years. And then this afternoon, he came over and had lunch with me. It's the first time I've ever met him. And the first thing he said to me is, "You got everything right."
Wow. Wow.
Oh, it was,
Wow.
So yeah, the clip is a little low on volume. It's just the way it comes. But
What I will say is he said he was stunned and amazed that this guy, Robert Redford, came over to him and said that RFK was right about everything because these guys were really rivals for a long time and RFK did not trust this guy. What I would say to RFK is your first instincts may have been right. Like, why is this guy coming over now? I don't know if you can trust him. So let's see what RFK actually does. But
yeah, and I think his running mate.
oh, wait, one more thing I was going to say. I was going to say RFK is very trusting, I think, because RFK, I've seen him in interviews where good points have been made and he's changed his point of view, which is a very, very rare characteristic in somebody, especially a leader. That's why a lot of people like RFK. But when other people change their opinions, it's very often not authentic. And they're changing their opinions so they want something, whether that's a job position or something else. And I think this guy, Robert Redford, may be in the second category, but we'll have to see.
He's an actor, isn't he, Robert Redford?
No, this is the head of the
different
CDC.
one. Oh, okay.
The same name, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And RFK runs in Hollywood circles. So.
Yes. What I was going to say is Nicole Shanahan, his running mate, is actually, I didn't really know much about her. I don't think many people did. She used to be married to one of the people that invented Google or had something that was very high up in Google, but she had a very interesting interview with Megyn Kelly, and she's been doing the rounds, and the message is very clear. And just listening to how she changed her mind and how being in those same circles, the Hollywood circles, really made her want to start exploring elsewhere, and how uncomfortable it made her feel, the way that they would disparage others while doing the exact same thing Well, she offers a lot of insight as to why somebody would want to change sides. And I think it also reflects with me because that's kind of my story.
Well, I will say Nicole Shanahan, I didn't know you were going to bring her up, and I'm glad you did. She is an absolute dime piece. She is on point with a lot of the things she's saying, and I think and I hope she runs for governor of California. She's well placed in the position if RFK doesn't run for governor of California for some reason. But when she first came in with RFK, I thought she was just Miss Moneybags, going to supply the campaign with the proper funding so they can get on the ballots. What she ended up being after interview I seen was somebody that was very intelligent and was really getting red pilled in real time. At least that's what I saw.
Yeah. And also, as part of the campaign, she's organized all of these ads that are, well, one of them is supposed to be kind of like a BBC documentary exploring the MAGA people. And really just going into, it shows people, and it's an ad, how somebody could start looking at the other side in a completely different way and why people might also want to.
I think we're going to play a Jillian Michaels interview. Yes. I think she was in front of Congress. She gave a speech that got a standing ovation. This is a rather longer speech. I think it's 8 or 9 minutes. We're going to let it play all the way through without interruption. I think it's a very important speech, and she's very well articulated. And what she is saying is really what RFK is saying and really what the Trump campaign is about. So I think this is a very powerful speech. Let's play it if you got it. Hopefully this sounds good this time.
Wait, the entirety almost of my generation, along with the 2 generations that followed, have fallen victim to America's unchecked obesity crisis and over 170 comorbidities that go along with it. I don't know about you, but I've watched my friends jabbing themselves every day with fertility drugs, praying for a pregnancy, my friends getting up at the crack of dawn to get radiated where the lump was found in their breast, my friends swallowing fistfuls of pills to manage their debilitating anxiety and depression. The decades between 1980 and now didn't beget a genetic quantum leap in which our DNA inexplicably mutated to make American bodies expand and fall ill at an unprecedented pace. And while Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z have our problems, 75% of us are not stupid, weak, or lazy. So hopefully you are wondering what has happened to us. And we're here to tell you. In the late 70s and the early 80s, a sinister series of events converged to change food and subsequently health in America indefinitely. A plague that crept like a fog while we slept, literally and figuratively, blindly trusting that the powers that be would never betray us. I mean, it seemed unthinkable to question whether a corporation would poison us for profit. I mean, the widespread assumption, at least when I was a kid, was that they were acting on our behalf. They wanted to make food, more affordable and more convenient. But it was this betrayal of trust that allowed them to insidiously infiltrate every part of our lives. Mm-hmm. Home-cooked meals became fast food value meals. Libraries and bookstores with no food or drink policies installed cafes selling 500-calorie coffee drinks and pastries. Eggs became heart disease cholesterol bombs, and Honey Nut Cheerios got labeled heart healthy. The default human condition in the 21st century is obese by design. Specific, traceable forms of what's referred to as structural violence are created by the catastrophic quartet of big farming, big food, big pharma, and big insurance. They systematically corrupt every institution of trust, which has led to the global spread of obesity and disease. Dysfunctional and destructive agricultural legislation like the Farm Bill, which favors high-yield, genetically engineered crops like corn and soy, leading to the proliferation of empty calories, saturated with all of these toxins that we've been talking about today for 3 hours, and it seems like we can never say enough about it. And then this glut of cheap calories provides a boon to the food industry giants. They just turn it into a bounty of ultra-processed, factory-assembled foods and beverages strategically engineered to undermine your society and foster your dependence like nicotine and cocaine. So we literally cannot eat just one. And to ensure that you don't, added measures are taken to inundate our physical surroundings. We're literally flooded with food, and we are brainwashed by ubiquitous cues to eat, whether it's the Taco Bell advertisement on the side of a bus as you drive to work or the vending machine at your kid's school. There is no place we spend time that's left untouched. They're omnipresent. with mega celebrities eating McDonald's and loving it. Sponsored dietitians paid to promote junk food on social media, utilizing anti-diet body positivity messaging like derail the shame in relation to fast food consumption. Time magazine brazenly issuing a defense of ultra-processed foods on their cover with the title, "What if ultra-processed foods aren't as bad as you think?" And when people like us try to sound the alarm, they ensure that we are swiftly labeled as anti-science, fat shamers, and even racists. They launch aggressive lobbying efforts to influence you, our politicians, to shape policy, secure federal grants, tax credits, subsidy dollars, which proliferates their product and heavily pads their bottom line. They have created a perfect storm in which pharmaceuticals that cost hundreds, if not thousands per month, like Ozempic, that are linked to stomach paralysis, pancreatitis, and thyroid cancer, can actually surge. This reinforces a growing dependence on medical interventions to manage weight in a society where systemic change in food production and consumption is desperately needed and also very possible. These monster corporations have mastered the art of distorting the research, influencing the policy, buying the narrative, engineering the environment, and manipulating consumer behavior. So given all of this, the question becomes, how did I escape? I mean, I still remember the lunches my mom would pack me as a little kid. And, I mean, it was such innocence and love, and she had no idea that my kindergarten lunchbox contains at least 50, now I'm thinking it's far more, carcinogens, solvents, emulsifiers, colorings, preservatives. I have the list. I'm going to skip it because we did it already. Frankenfoods like juice boxes with no juice. Processed lunch meat held together by meat glue. I mean, as a tween, I would sit on the couch after school, just numbingly inhaling Cheetos and Oreos in front of the TV. There was no such thing as meal times. And I could stuff myself endlessly and never feel full. Buckets of KFC at night for our family dinner because it was quick, convenient, affordable. And I remember I would lay in bed comatose. It was a lifestyle equivalent to a death sentence, but we never questioned it because we were just a family that was simply attuned to the culture. So it should come as no surprise that by that tender age of 13, I was obese, failing in school, and becoming increasingly depressed and despondent. And my mom began to feel helpless. She spoke to my pediatrician and a child psychiatrist, both of whom suggested she medicate me on Prozac and Ritalin, but she was watching many of her friends' kids on this exact same protocol, and they weren't improving. No. My mom was becoming progressively desperate to help me, and then fate intervened. She met another mom whose child had been thriving since joining a local martial arts studio, and she signed me up the next day. And my sensei was smart enough to recognize the ways in which America's youth were being routinely poisoned. And he cared enough to create an environment where myself and the other students under his wing were educated, insulated, and nourished to become our best selves. I went on to get my black belt and become a trainer and a nutritionist myself with the intention of waking up the others and giving them the same tools that he gave me. And while I have been fortunate enough to pull many back from the edge, over the course of my 30-year career, I have lost just as many, if not more, than I have saved. I have watched them slip through my fingers. Mothers that orphaned their children, husbands that widowed their wives. I have even watched parents forced to suffer the unthinkable loss of their adult children. There are not words to express the sadness I have felt and the fury knowing that they were literally sacrificed at the altar of unchecked corporate greed. Most Americans are simply too financially strained, psychologically drained, and physically addicted to break free without a systemic intervention. Attempting to combat the status quo and the powers that be is beyond swimming upstream. It is like trying to push a rampaging river that's infested with piranhas. After years of trying to turn the tide, I submit that the powers that be are simply too powerful for us to take on alone. I implore the people here that shape the policy to take a stand. The buck must stop with you while the American people tend to the business of raising children and participating in the workforce to ensure that the wheels of our country go around. They tapped you to stand watch. They tapped you to stand guard. We must hold these bad actors accountable. And I presume the testimonials you heard today moved you. Digest them, discuss them, and act upon them. Because if this current trend is allowed to persist, the stakes will be untenable. We are in the middle of an extinction level event. The American people need help. They need heroes. And people of Washington, your constituents chose you to be their champion. Please be the change. Thank you.
That was very well put and well worth the time that we spent to watch that video.
Yeah.
I would say this is probably one of the biggest issues of this election that nobody's talking about. This is a bipartisan issue. When it was polled, 85% across the board, whether Republican, Democrat, or Independent. And the only person talking about it is RFK. And as a result, because he's with Trump, Trump's going to get those voters. And this is something that we don't just want to have lip service to before an election. This is something that we want to not only change America, but change Canada, Mexico, and the rest of the world. The way food is manufactured is just absolutely ridiculous. What's going on with the Amish farmers right now who really make their food organically without these pesticides, without these industrial farming methods? The state's coming after them. The federal government's coming after them. We need more farmers like the Amish farmers to produce clean, healthy food for not just the American people, but for the world. Sorry, that was a little
That's
preachy
okay.
and intense.
Well, no, and I agree, because right now we are in Mexico, which at one point was the most obese country in the world, and still, I believe, is the number 1 and number 2 consumer of Coca-Cola. So, I mean, it is very present, ever present. And the United States is very much not the only country that has these issues, but I think it can be the one that can highlight them the most because of the ground swell that they have throughout the world and the influence they have. And right now we're seeing everybody turning the tide on body positivity, which I hated.
Well, you're racist if you want to eat healthy.
Well, no, because it's completely disingenuous, because we all know it is not healthy, it is not attractive, and these people are suffering, but it's more humane to tell them that, hey, this is not good for you, rather than, encouraging it to continue. So now we're seeing it completely turn around, and celebrities are becoming stick thin again, and they have Ozempic face, and maybe some of them will start getting thyroid cancer and stomach issues just because they're now the ones that decide that everybody needs to be skinny. And what happens to those people in the middle, to the normal people that kind of stand there wondering, well, what should I do?
Well, this Ozempic craze is absolutely insane. I was watching an article the other day where they're talking about Ozempic's only $100 a dose in this country and $50 a dose in this country, and it costs thousands in America, but it stops cancer and it makes you skinny, and it's this magic drug.
Stops diabetes.
I'm going to tell you,
causes cancer.
We'll see in about 10 years what it actually does. What it probably actually does is kill you. Mm-hmm. But I will say this. We did recently move to Mexico, and I had major issues with all my joints. I used to teach jujitsu, and I used to feel great. And then my body started breaking down. I started having major swelling in my entire spine. I didn't know what it was. Once we moved to Mexico, all that has virtually gone away. Yeah. And now I'm in rehabilitation to get my back better. So hopefully one day I can teach jujitsu again. Yeah. But I will say, I personally believe it has a lot to do with the food. The food in Canada, I believe, is highly genetically modified. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was something in the water there.
Yeah, the recovery you've kind of done is almost miraculous, because there were days you couldn't really walk. I couldn't walk. I
couldn't get up.
Everything hurt.
The entire reason I started doing YouTube, or one of the major reasons, other than the Canadian government overstepping their bounds, was I didn't know what I was going to do with the second half of my life. In the first half of my life, everything I did was physical, whether it was construction, jujitsu, working on an oil rig, or being a bouncer. Mm-hmm. Everything I did was physical. So when my back started going out, I didn't know how I was going to make money or survive. We started doing YouTube, and hopefully it's going to work out. We'll find out. But if I can get my back now, that would be phenomenal.
That's another avenue.
But let's go into the next story. We spent a lot of time on that one. I thought it was kind of important.
I was just going to say, I do think a lot of this lies and rests on the lawmakers, policymakers, and the people that are in the food industry, the pharma industry, the farming industry, all of those. But it is also about waking people themselves up because, yes, organic food is more expensive, whatever. But for example, I used to be very, very big. And it was one of the reasons was because I was not happy with myself and I was very, very depressed and didn't want to move. And then when I started kind of getting my life together, it just kind of went the other way and back to the my normal size. And I think a lot of people are a little bit too afraid to talk about the reason why a lot of people are this big is because of other issues, not maybe just the food or just it has to do with you personally as well.
Yeah, how you feel on the inside is going to reflect very often how you look on the outside, I think.
And people just don't want to, especially with the body positivity movement, but people don't really want to admit that.
Maybe let's go into Andrew Cuomo here. What do you got to tell me about Andrew?
So from the Daily Wire, once again, which seems to be our only source.
That's my favorite source.
Insiders say Andrew Cuomo may reconsider New York City mayoral bid after Eric Adams' indictment. His spokesman says he's not going to run. And however, rumors are still swirling. Eric Adams got indicted recently, and Cuomo had to leave pretty, not in a nice way. He resigned in disgrace 3 years ago, but now he maybe wants to run again. Now that apparently Eric Adams has also resigned, probably will have to resign in disgrace.
Well, I guess Cuomo didn't want to run now against Eric Adams because they have very similar stances and they share demographics and voting blocks. So if Cuomo runs, he's going to take a lot of voters from Eric Adams. But if Eric Adams is out of the picture, Eric Adams is very likely to send his voters and his demographics Cuomo's way. And the only reason Eric Adams got voted in the first place was he was the most conservative of all the liberal choices within New York. And Cuomo, I won't be surprised if Cuomo actually runs as a Republican. His brother is already starting to make that transition into conservative media and independent media. Yeah. He used to be extremely liberal. I mean, I hate the guy, but it is nice to have liberal ideas in a conservative space so you can go back and forth and you really have a battle of ideas to see which ones are best. Very often for the last few years, liberals weren't talking to Republicans. They wouldn't go on conservative shows. Conservatives wouldn't go on liberal shows. So it's good to see Cuomo's brother, at least, making that transition.
Yes, he's insufferable. But, I mean, it's crazy that now he's trying to come back. I don't think he could do it.
Oh, well, you're wrong. You're wrong. If he runs,
he killed a bunch of grannies.
If he runs, he's going to win. That's going to be it. He had bad stances on COVID. He was a bully to his staff, and he had a lot of sexual harassment allegations. But I really think the guy's going to win. This is New York. If Trump can win the presidency, Cuomo can go back, and he's from a multi-generational family of politicians. He knows how the game's played. So,
but I mean, can't people realize that some of the policies actually killed? There were so many people that were angry.
I actually think he's,
and that's why all the other stuff started to come out.
I think he realizes there's no loyalty in the Democratic Party,
yes,
and he's going to be pissed. And him and Trump, I'm willing to bet, have a relationship, and I think Trump would endorse him if he comes over to the Republican Party. I will not be surprised.
But we have to see how loyal the New Yorkers really are, because I mean, I don't think and the Republicans, because the Republicans were the main ones that were going against him. Would they accept him? Are they just accepting anybody right now?
Well, I think they're fed up with liberal policies, with the crime and everything else.
Yeah, the people themselves.
Even though Cuomo is a liberal, I think he's going to have a lot of conservative policies.
Probably, but I mean, the Republicans, would they really want to bring him in after all they essentially made him go through justifiably?
Initially I would have said no, but his brother was much worse than him, and they welcomed him in with open arms into
but his brother didn't set any policies that sent a lot of people to nursing homes and to essentially kill your grandma.
Yeah, but he did come out of the basement talking about, I've just been in quarantine.
That's just because he's an idiot.
And the whole time he wasn't. And the American people voted with their viewership, and they are watching Cuomo now that he is on conservative networks.
I think they're just watching him to see him in conservative networks. And he has been trying to, pull back his stances. And he did this whole showing the media and he's pretending to be all appalled. He's trying to save himself.
His career.
Yes, but it could be a little disingenuous. I mean, I think a lot of people probably see it as a little bit disingenuous.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But it does make for good debates on conservative media. I will say that. He does, even though I don't agree with his policies, he does usually take the best talking points for these liberal stances. So it makes for a good debate very often. Sometimes I watch PBD and he has that one leftist that doesn't know how to debate for his ass.
Yeah.
So when Cuomo's on there, I do like
Patrick
it.
Bet David.
No, but David knows how to debate.
No, I'm saying PBD is Patrick
Oh,
Bet
yeah.
David's show.
Yeah,
A
if
lot
you
of
don't
people
watch
know.
Patrick Pitt David, you definitely should.
Apparently, we're not allowed to give recommendations out.
Whoa. Are you still angry about yesterday?
Yes.
Okay, well, if you haven't watched Robert Barnes on vivabarneslaw.locals.com, he's the best source of information.
Yes.
Is there anybody you want to shout out?
Jessica Reed Krause, House and Habit, as I said yesterday.
And Candace
that's it.
Owens.
Sure.
Okay, let's go into the next story here.
Hang on.
I think we got the dock workers.
Yes. So a dock workers strike could cost Kamala the White House. It's not the only thing. Why won't Biden stop it? Some say the president wants to hurt Harris, while others say he's afraid to alienate a major union. About 4,500 dock workers will walk off the job.
4,500 or
45,000, sorry, will walk off the job in a massive strike that will shutter dozens of ports along the East and Gulf coasts, upending the economy just weeks before a tight presidential election. President Joe Biden could stop the strike, but says he won't. Contract negotiations between the Internal Longshoremen's Association and port ownership broke down over the summer, and the two sides remain in a stalemate over both wages and automating port operations. And it's a very big strike, wide-ranging supply chain disruptions, national security threats even. And he has the authority under the Taft-Hartley law to force union workers to stay on the job for another 80 days. But White House officials have made it clear that Biden has no intention of getting involved. As of Thursday, 5 days before a strike, so today, would begin, the Biden administration was still simply encouraging both sides to get back to the negotiating table and figure something out.
I think I may be wrong on this, but this is about this can affect half the ports on the East Coast or half the ports in the United States. This is huge. This could cost Kamala Harris the election. And 45,000 dock workers is a lot. Now, this is about wages and automation. And there's two reasons why Biden might not want to step in. Number one, he's extremely angry at the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris for being ousted. And he's shown that by putting a Trump hat on and some of the things he said. I think.
And he's being a bit more lucid as well.
Yeah. I could totally see this as one last to the Democratic Party. I don't think they're going to censor me for that.
I'm censoring you for that.
But the other side of the coin was they were saying he might not want to step in and because he can force the dock workers to go to work for another 80 days until after the election. If he does that, the union's not going to be able to have as much negotiating leverage because there's not going to be any real rush on it. Right before an election is they have the best terms for negotiation because the federal government is in a real bind. They need those dock workers because they need to keep the economy strong until after the election. So if Biden makes them continue to work till after the election, they're not going to get as good as a union contract as if they would if they got to strike right now. But between the two options, I really think he's just trying to get even with the Democratic Party.
Probably, or like he maybe thinks that yes, now he has the liberty to, as you say, kind of give them a finger, or maybe he is still kind of loopy and off on the beach somewhere. But I mean, they did treat him pretty badly. And the fact that Kamala is going down in the polls right now, even though a lot of people don't want to admit it, even in the most Democrat almost run polls, she's going down and Trump is going up and people are starting to get scared. So maybe he's just like letting it go to its like inevitable conclusion.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, maybe. Well, I mean, we'll have to see. You got anything else about the dock workers? I just kind of wanted to bring that up. We brought it up last week.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a continuous story
yesterday.
because, well, I think it's about to blow up if they do manage to go on strike.
Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, if a lot of people don't realize, dock workers, all shipping and like all of shipping throughout the world almost always relies on boats, like all of these big container ships. If there's no dock workers to receive them or to sort them or to process them, then shipping essentially is stalled.
This is also re-highlighting the Teamsters fact that like all these unions, even if the heads are for Kamala Harris, the workers are themselves and the blue collar workers are all for Trump. I keep harping on this fact. It seems like every day, but every day another union comes over to Trump.
Yeah. I broke my microphone.
Okay, let's talk about the last story.
Sure. So
we're in Mexico.
This one right now is a little bit closer to home. So Spain lodged formal complaint against Mexico for snub to King Felipe. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has expressed his great sadness over the row, which he blamed on political motivations and the stupidity of both the current and the future president of Mexico. But Spain formally protested Mexico's decisions not to invite King Felipe VI to the inauguration of Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico's first female president. That was unnecessary, but whatever. On Tuesday, the same day that El País revealed that Mexico had not sent the King of Spain an invitation, the Spanish Foreign Affairs Ministry sent a formal complaint to the Mexican Foreign Affairs Ministry. And they've been going back and forth. This whole situation goes back quite a few years now when AMLO, in all of his woke DEI stupidity, decided to start basically a caste war, or a race war within Mexico and within telling Spain that because we were colonized 500 years ago, that now they owe us reparations and all of the artifacts that used to be in the museum. So this has been going back and forth for a while now. AMLO also recently got pushback from both the Canadian and the American ambassadors to Mexico, and he decided to ban them, essentially, from giving any opinions. So he's going on this rampage. We've seen it already play out in the United States, the whole colonialism, the whole reparations thing. It's clearly just like a recycled, they're just recycling it now for Latin America and getting people riled up and angry when really, I mean, the States is a little bit closer in the historical context and in the timeline, but this happened, like Mexico got colonized 500 something years ago, and we're still, he's bringing this up. Of course, I mean, there's a drop of blood, there's a saying, there's a drop of Spanish blood and a drop of indigenous blood in every single Mexican, no matter what color you are and what color you look. It's very different than in the States.
Mexico's an homogenized country. Like, it's not like the United States where they had slavery. But when you look at Canada, where we were living for a long time, they didn't have any slavery. So they weren't able to use that Marxist approach to try to manipulate the power structures. So what they did was they used indigenous people against the colonizers, the colonizing Britons. Now, AMLO's trying to do the same thing with the colonizing Spaniards over to Mexico. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Even in countries that are very homogenized, they're trying to create racial divisions and subgroups to create voter blocks in order to gain power. And AMLO, I was going to also say AMLO recently went against Anthony Blinken and Justin Trudeau because they spoke up against his judicial reforms, which a lot of people in Mexico were mad about.
And I mean, also, we have to consider that, yes, it was very brutal, and what the colonizers did, the Spaniards did in Mexico is horrible. But again, it was a very, very, very long time ago. I mean, we don't have the traces of it. Yes, there's a lot of division and there's a lot of poverty. Yes, we can acknowledge that. But to blame it all on colonialism is to ignore the fact that he hasn't really done a good job with managing the country and actually doing his job.
Blaming it on colonialism is only going to divide the population and create any progress you're going to have. It's going to slow it down. If the people just come together, work together, you're going to make a much stronger and more unified country. Mexico is in a very special place right now where economically they are exploding. And over the next 20 years, I would seriously expect them to become an economic power.
Yeah. And I think what's been happening with all of these divisions of like these people versus these people, this race versus this race, it's much easier to control groups when they're not working together and when they're all angry at each other and focused on, the fights that they have between them rather than with the government and the way that the country is managed and et cetera, et cetera. But I think it is now ridiculous that it has gotten to the point where like a very serious event and something that the Spanish king and the Spaniards have never missed, like as in an act of goodwill throughout all of Latin America that they've been coming for decades and decades and decades. It's insane that now, because of this lunatic's crazy race war that he wants to instigate, now it's been completely broken, and the relationships that were also important are completely.
Well, I would say this is
it's embarrassing.
This is really the appealing factor for conservatism in the new generation, especially when you look at what happened with conservatism in the United States and in Canada. The left is really trying to cause division and create little voter blocks they can give things to and collect voters. The conservative movement is really having a unified message of a unified identity and really bringing in the best thought leaders from libertarianism, liberalism, and conservatism, and they're talking together like what works best as a collective for the entire country. And this is why young people are drawn to that, because it's not about division and hate. It's about unity and strength and strong individualism and strong families.
And because in the States, they've been hammered over and over and over again with this since at least the late 90s, early 2000s. Here in Mexico, we really didn't have that discourse. I'll also admit that, like, growing up, there wasn't much talk about the issues that we do have regarding class and race and poverty and etc. But I think because we didn't grow up with that guilt, or in some cases that victimization that the States grows up with, and that Canada, even the kids starting to grow up with, it's going to take a bit longer for the people. Like, only some people will kind of hook onto that, but most people, I think, in Mexico will be faster to realize the real intentions of why Moreno wants to,
I really hope so, but he's really taking money from the rich and giving it to his friends and the constituency he wants.
Oh, the Mexicans?
He's really trying to buy votes and buy voter blocks. But I will say this, for anybody that watched my morning show today, thank you. I know it's hard to sit through those still. I'm still getting better on my own. But I did talk about Gavin Newsom. And Gavin Newsom recently signed a bill apologizing for slavery in California, which California didn't have much of a slavery issue because they banned it in 1850. But the reason he signed that bill was because he vetoed 2 reparation bills. So he was really just using that apology as a shield, so nobody would pay attention to these reparations he denied. Now, I don't necessarily believe in reparations in the traditional sense of giving people handouts, but I do think you should give impoverished communities a hand up through different systems such as schooling, education, and things like this. But if you help impoverished communities, that would include Black people, white people, and Mexican people, everybody. Yeah. And it kind of brings them together, and it brings up the most disadvantaged people in the society.
It creates an actual mechanism by which you can continue that improvement and actually make a difference in people's lives. Handing out cash and saying, go do whatever you want with it, well, they will. And is that the best use of a lot of taxpayer money as well? Because where is it coming from? Again, nothing is free. Nothing that they hand out is ever free. You have to think about where all of those handouts and things come from. I'm also speaking to Mexicans and Morena supporters. It's not like free money gets printed.
I will say
it does,
on Tuesday, the first woman president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, is. I'm saying that because a minute ago, they didn't have to say that part.
Well, because they don't.
But anyway, she's being inaugurated on Tuesday. So her inauguration, along with a bunch of protests, I'm sure, are going to happen on Tuesday. We're going to try to go out and cover some of these protests. I think the protests will make for better, more dynamic interviews and questions than just going to the inauguration, which is, if you want to watch, it's broadcast on regular TV. But we may not have a show on Tuesday, so if you're looking for us next week.
I'm sure they all are waiting patiently for
my Mike Tyson one blew up. I had almost 300 views.
Yes, you did very well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Do you have anything else?
Well, no, that we are going. It will be probably coverage in Spanish. We'll probably touch on the subject and how it went on the show after the day we go, but coverage will be in Spanish, and live streams are always in English.
But if you have any questions you want us to ask any of the protesters, please leave it in the comments.
Or super chat it now.
Every time somebody's left,
not super chat it, or we don't have super chat, or chat it. Put it in the chat right now.
Yeah, the last protest we went to, we asked questions that our viewers wanted us to ask, and it turned out well.
Yeah, it was interesting, and it would be particularly interesting to interview some of the Morena supporters, because some of the highbrow, elite, intellectual, academic Morena supporters have actually been backing away very quietly and slowly as rats fleeing a sinking ship after the judicial reform was approved, and the fact that we're now going to be electing judges, which is not a very corrupt way to do it at all. Now they're kind of realizing the error of their ways and kind of running away. So I'm wondering if actual supporters...
I'm interested to see how these elections turn out, because I think...
Well, they've already turned out.
Appointing judges is going to be corrupt, and electing judges is corrupt. So these political appointments and these political elections, I'm interested to see what actually happens.
Yeah, well, the issue is that was not the issue. The issue was what was happening inside, not whatever. Yeah. I've gone into it before. I guess for now, Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Leave any comments, questions, concerns, etc. in the comments. And thank you so much for watching.
Adios.